Recently I ranked all the regular bosses of Kirby's Return to Dream Land Deluxe you know from the original. This remake, however, includes not only additional mini-games but a whole campaign for Magolor as well, naturally introducing new challenges and dangerous bosses. While most of them reuse basic blueprints from the regular versions, there are still more than enough differences to warrant an extra ranking for every post-game encounter. Just like I did with Kirby and the Forgotten Lands post-game bosses, I'm going to judge these enemies based on how they improve on their origin and add to the initial battle. Surprisingly enough, the head of all Sphere Doomers, crowned Doomer and supposed to be final encounter in Magolor's epilogue, sits at the bottom of the ranking. The very premise of this fight is already not in Crowned Doomer's favor, as we just fought 4 of them before in a way more fast-paced clash. On top of that, the regular Grand Doomer from the normal game is already an enhanced version of standard Sphere Doomers, while the Rampaging Doomers build furthermore on that foundation. So on paper, the Crowned Doomer is the 3rd iteration of a boss which already appears way too often in the base game, and I felt a little full at this point. All of his attacks are nothing we haven't seen before, and although this battle takes place at the end, it's easier than the Rampaging Doomers. Fortunately though, he is not the last foe of this mode and therefore acceptable as an appetizer. If you have watched the first boss ranking, then you are probably aware how I praised the original Goryetz. His bouncy attitude and over-the-top references synergized in a battle not to be forgotten, which cannot necessarily be said about this watery counterpart. Again, I'm judging these bosses based on how they improve on the original, and I cannot see any outstanding additions. His bubbles are easier to dodge while being slower, and there's not a particular ace waiting to be revealed. The only noteworthy enhancement is his instant teleportation, because of course they would like to underline the shonen influence even more. It's a welcoming surprise the first time it happens, but gets predictable really fast and, amusingly enough, messes with your expectations the next time you fight the standard Goryetz. The first opponent in Magolor's epilogue, Electric Duta, is a shocking upgrade from the weak original, never being able to beat anyone. Although the same goes for his green brother, there are still some significant improvements. Instead of using a turban, he switches up his drip, gets harder to hit and creates shockwaves when landing. Normal Dutas suffered from being able to completely overrun him with attacks, and by disappearing nearly entirely, you are forced to retreat and let the fight breathe. One interesting new technique is using a giant saber, and for being the first boss, all of this isn't too bad. Still, for whatever reason, it's quite cumbersome to reach the platinum medal in this fight, due to how Electric Duta simply dies too fast to build up the combo points. But then again, some things may never change, no matter how many upgrades a boss receives. Already being hugely aggressive in the origin, the Fatty Puffer increased his wrath with a fiery passion and poses a refreshing challenge. Making use of the background and leaving fire trails behind, not only do you have to pay attention where and how this flexible fish attacks, but what he's planning to do next. Generally speaking, this is actually a rather grounded rearmament, just like his EX counterpart, but all the more interesting when taking Magolor into account. With Kirby, this battle is somewhat difficult, but would not be worth praising beyond this placement, whereas Magolor is a completely different case. Depending on how much you upgraded the floating ability, it might might be tough to dodge the fish's huge rolling attack, and you have to actually time the jump and floating in order to survive. Because of this, the fiery puffer is a fitting warning sign to show you what to upgrade and what danger might await you. In classic Kirby fashion, the true arena of Kirby's Return to Dream Land Deluxe offers a special challenge not seen in the original. As if this arena run wasn't already challenging enough, with the addition of all the new bosses, Magolor's stubborn soul remains and enters one final round to further cement himself as one of the most iconic Kirby final bosses of all time. Of course they didn't went all out and created a completely original new form, but instead further increased his speed, attack, power and intimidation. Right from the start, Magolor Soul shows his strength by presenting two new super abilities, reminiscent of the freshly added sand and robot skills. This obviously implies there might be more super abilities we do not know about, but there's no time to theorize when keeping Kirby alive should be your #1 priority. This goes for basically every secret final boss in any true arena, but I enjoy how they are simply not holding back in spite of how troublesome the lead up was to this point. A true arena simply doesn't care if you don't have any healing items left or wasted a good hour fighting through these bosses. Magolor Soul is ready to once again crush all of those ambitions just like any other true final boss. The icing on the cake are subtle cries for help from Magolor, showing he has definitely enough and would rather increase his own strength instead of using an artifact like the Master Crown. This fight stays kinda in between many others and is technically not based on any other existing boss. In fact, they are the literal translation of a mere sphere Doomer, multiplied by 4 and all the more belligerent. Just like Landia, they are the only enemies to make use of multiple players and constantly fly around the arena, while giving very few chances to strike back. Those strange clouds they left every time they go for an attack explode after a couple of seconds and add tension to the battle. That is already more than stressful enough. At this point, it's wise to upgrade nearly every ability to some extent, as the Rampaging Doomers can be easily classified as the probably strongest enemy in this epilogue. After traveling through this mysterious dimension, completing the seed of the gem apple and defeating the crowned Doomer, no one would blame you for thinking this is the end. Post-game modes like Meta Nightmare or DDD Tour either end on some kind of remixed boss you already encountered or rely heavily on fan service. Very rarely do we get to see a completely original opponent so ambitious it easily outclasses most Kirby finals in general. This description fits our last foe and #1 on this ranking perfectly. Return to Dreamland's main MacGuffin itself, the Master Crown. Despite the fact many people predicted this powerful item to be the main villain villain to some extent, I kept my expectations in check, even though everything up to this moment was already surprisingly enterprising enough. The worst thing to happen is looking forward to something which was never in the realm of possibilities. Luckily, my cautious pessimism got slapped by a wooden reality check, giving off the impression of a Final Fantasy boss. It's not like this happens for the first time in the series. I was downright impressed by the down-to-earth yet intimidating visuals of this creature, and hell plainly has a hang for trees, I have to say. Something about the combination of nature and the disgusting parasitic corruption of the Master Crown results in a style that fits the simplistic principle of the franchise while keeping the eldritch tone of most Kirby final bosses. The battle arena reflects this contrast, switching from a vague dimensional space to an apocalyptic sunlight, making us theorize what this place actually is. Every vibrant fan recognized the connection to Super Kirby Clash, a mere free spin-off mind you, and the unobtrusive melodies of said spin-off seasoned the soundtrack with the perfect amount of fan service. All of this refers to the bombastic scenery though, but what about the fight itself? Because of Master Crown's huge appearance, it mostly stays in the background and can only be heard by attacking its roots, trying to pierce you. With a setup like that, there's no opportunity to consistently deal damage, and the boss gets the chance to show off all his moves without being overwhelmed by Magolor's upgraded, overpowered abilities. It's the perfect way to make sure the final enemy is not a pushover, but to prove the tree's massive body. It occasionally jumps to the foreground and stares at you for a couple of seconds, being like, you didn't expect me to actually do it, right? Another impressive looking skill are its massive lasers, and despite the fact most of Master Crown's techniques are theoretically very easy to dodge, they at least look impactful. I still think they missed an opportunity to create a rendition of Wispy Woods as the final boss for at least once in a Kirby game, but nonetheless, the Master Crown finished Magolor's epilogue on a high note and will be remembered for its lore implications for quite the long time. This concludes the boss ranking of Kirby's Return to Dream Land Deluxe. Counting all these enemies and their different deviations together, we have a catalog of one of the most intriguing opponents in the series. Just take a look at the widely expanded True Arena and internalize how much more demanding this challenge just became. Either way, what is your favorite battle in the series, and do you agree with my ranking? Was Magolor's epilogue satisfying enough, or did you wish to see more exciting confrontations? Let me know your personal ranking in the comments below.